All right, let's talk about decoding the chip tax. The entire AI revolution, right? It's all built on these incredibly powerful computer chips. But there's this hidden cost, a kind of tax that's slowing everything down. So today, we're going to decode it. So here's the big question that's got everyone in the tech world scratching their heads. Why on earth are the biggest tech companies spending billions, literally billions, to build their own AI chips? I mean, we're talking about Nvidia's biggest customers. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're all suddenly in this race to design their own silicone. It seems kind of backward, right? Are they just looking for a tiny little performance bump? Or is there something else going on here? A much colder, harder economic reason? Well, this is where I come in. As an applied economist, I just couldn't resist a puzzle like this. So I built an economic model to figure out what's really happening in this war for compute. And what I found was pretty startling. Turns out this whole thing isn't really about who can build a slightly faster chip. No, it's about companies desperately trying to escape a hidden, punishing tax that's holding back the entire AI industry. Okay, so to really get why they're going through all this trouble, we need to introduce the villain of our story. And it all comes down to a classic problem in economics that, believe it or not, explains everything. It's a concept called double marginalization. And I know it sounds super academic and complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Imagine you have a supply chain with two powerful companies in a row. Think of them as two monopolies. Each one adds its own profit margin. So the first company adds a markup, and then the second company takes that new, higher price and adds its markup on top. The result? The final price for you gets jacked up not once, but twice. You know, the easiest way to wrap your head around this is the two toll booths analogy. So picture this. You're trying to get on a highway. The first toll booth, run by our monopoly chip supplier, let's say Nvidia, charges you a huge fee just to get on the on-ramp. They're trying to make as much profit as possible. Okay, you pay it. But then you get onto the highway and bam, there's a second toll booth run by the cloud computing company. They charge you their own massive fee on top of what you just paid. Each one is just doing what's best for them, but the final price is so outrageous that a lot of drivers just turn around and go home. That is exactly what's happening in the AI market right now. So how does this double tax actually play out in real numbers? This is exactly what I wanted to find out with my model. I broke the whole thing down into 3 steps. Let's walk through what the data showed me. Okay, so let's look at step 1 in the model. You see this blue line? That represents the real demand for AI compute out there in the world. Everybody who wants to use it. But here's the catch. Nvidia doesn't sell to all those people. They sell to the big cloud companies. And those companies, of course, need to make a profit. That profit they take creates what I call a margin wedge. It basically shrinks the market, pushing the demand that Nvidia actually sees all the way down to this green line. So from Nvidia's point of view, the market looks way smaller than it really is. All right, so now looking at that smaller artificial market, what does Nvidia do? Well, it acts like any smart monopoly would. My model shows this really clearly. Even if a chip costs them just $1 single to produce, their profit sweet spot, the price that makes them the most money, is to charge a wholesale price of $4. That's a 300% markup. That's our first giant toll. And that brings us to the final step. The cloud company now has to buy that chip for $4. So what do you think they do? They tack on their own markup, of course. This is our second toll booth. They take their cut, and by the time it gets to the end user, to you, the final price lands at $4.75. So let that sink in for a second. $4.75. A piece of AI compute that costs just $1 single to make ends up costing the final customer almost 5 times that. And the really crucial thing to understand is that this isn't because the tech itself is that expensive. It's all because of the structure of the market. And that right there is the tragedy of double marginalization. You've got these two powerful gatekeepers. And look, they're both acting perfectly rationally, just trying to maximize their own profits. But when you stack them on top of each other, the result is a price that's just too high and a market that's way smaller than it should be. And you know what that means? Innovation gets choked off. Great ideas die on the vine because people just can't afford to build them. So if you're one of these cloud companies, what do? You're stuck. You can't exactly force the monopoly supplier to lower its price. Your only real move is to, well, build your own highway. Get off theirs completely. And so that's exactly what I simulated in my model. What happens the moment one of these big players decides to build its own chips? And the result is immediate. It is dramatic. On the left, you see the status quo, that $475 price tag. But now, look at the right. This is the scenario where just one company, say Google, starts integrating and making its own chips. The price for the consumer absolutely plummets to $325. A huge drop. Why? Well, for their own customers, they've basically torn down that first toll booth. But here's the other amazing part. Nvidia is now forced to slash prices for everyone else because they're terrified of losing their other customers too. Competition just works. And this isn't just a story about cheaper prices. It's bigger than that. When prices fall, it unlocks a flood of new supply. So in the old world, the high price meant AI was this scarce, precious resource. My model shows only about 2.25 units were available. But as soon as that price drops, availability just explodes. It jumps all the way to 3.75 units. We're literally moving from a world of AI scarcity to one of AI abundance. This table from my model, I think, really lays out the whole story. Just look at the trend here. As more and more companies start building their own chips, look what happens. The final price keeps falling. The total quantity of AI compute out there basically doubles. But honestly, the most important number on this entire chart is right here on the bottom row, consumer surplus. That's just a fancy economic term for the value that you, the consumer, get to keep. And it skyrockets by 300%. The data from the model is crystal clear. The ultimate winner of this whole chip war isn't Google or Amazon. It's us. So, when you put it all together, you realize this isn't just some corporate squabble between a few tech giants. What we're actually watching is a fundamental restructuring of the entire AI economy, and the implications of that shift are, frankly, massive for every single one of us. So let's just boil it down to the 4 big takeaways from my analysis. First, building your own chips isn't just a cool tech project for these companies, it's an economic necessity to escape that brutal double tax. Second, even a little bit of competition goes a long way, creating this huge ripple effect that lowers prices for everybody. Third, this entire fight is what transforms AI from this scarce, expensive luxury into a cheap, abundant utility, almost like electricity. And finally, and most importantly, the ultimate winner in all of this is the consumer. And all of this leads to one final, and I think really exciting question. What happens next? When the fundamental cost of intelligence just collapses, when AI becomes as cheap and as easy to access as flipping a light switch, what new things become possible? What incredible applications, what new kinds of businesses, what scientific breakthroughs are just sitting there waiting to be discovered once that barrier is gone? That is the real promise that gets unlocked when we finally break the chip tax.